Okay, so once you've entered in your window dimensions and the number of windows, right? What we're going to do is scroll down and select what style of trim do we want, right? So we have 4 styles we can choose from. 2 picture frame and 2 more traditional styles. The difference between A and B and C and D is you can just see that they have mitered casing in the corners here. And A and C will have butt joints. So select which style you want. So we're going to type C. And then we're going to select the material that we want to use, right? And so we'll go ahead and select 3.5 pre-primed pine, right? That's what we're going to use. Now, once again, anytime you see a plus sign next to your material, that's where you can go and change, add, or edit anything in the drop-down menu, right? So we can see we have our 16-foot prime is 1381. If we wanted to change that, we could just come down here and change it. Or if we wanted to add any type of trim, we can just do it right here, right? You can go back here, go back to window trim, and it'll take you right back to where we are. So anytime you want to add material, click the plus, enter it into the appropriate column. Make sure you fill in all the appropriate information, especially width, because that's going to be used to calculate a lot of our trim. And then you can just go back. Okay, so once we've selected the type and the type of casing we want, you'll see that if it's type C and D, this information will pop up. We don't need that information if it's type A or type B because we won't have a stool or apron. So let's go with type C. Anytime you're missing information, an alert will pop up, and once you enter that information, it will go away. So for our apron, what we're going to do is we're going to use a little bit wider piece. Let's use a 1x6 pre-pine. And for our stool, now a lot of times you can rip down a board to use for your stool, right? So let's say your stool is like the stool width that you want is going to be like 2.5 inches, right? And you selected a 5.5 foot wide board. You can, if you put in, this is optional because this will basically, if you don't put anything here, it's going to say you're going to use the entire width of this board for your stool, right? But if you put in the width of your stool and you can get 2 stools out of it or 3, it will take that into consideration, right? So watch this. You can see 1x6 pre-primed pine. We're going to need 6 boards, but if we put this in at 2.5, we're only going to need 5 because we can rip down this board in half, so we get twice as many stools out of one board. So that's why this is optional. You don't have to put this in, and it will just say you're going to use the full width of this board for your stool. Now, if you have extension jambs, check this button, and then you're going to want to enter your extension jamb material, right? So we'll do the same thing. We'll do pre-primed 1x6, and once again, just like our stool, let's say this is going to be the width of our extension jamb. If that's going to be, let's say, 2.5 inches, right? We can enter that in here, right? 2.5 inches, and let's see if it changes, right? So see how we're going to need 22 boards? If we put 2.5 in there, we'll only need 14. And that's because it's going to say we don't need the entire 1x6 pine board for our extension jambs, as long as our extension jamb is this, right? But if we were to put one, like, watch, 3.5, it wouldn't make a difference at all what we put in here because we couldn't get, if our extension jamb is 2.5 inches wide, we're not going to be able to get 2 extension jamb pieces out of one board, right? So you can kind of decide however you want to make your extension jambs or your stools. You can use this tool to basically, do you want to rip a board down, right? Last thing we have to choose is, are there mullions, right? So if you don't know about how to trim out windows like this, right, click this question mark right here. It'll send you to a video. But if you have mullions, right, these are going to be mullions, sort of like your pieces of trim in between windows, right? So if you have mullions, check which window has mullions, enter the amount of mullions, and then select the material you're going to use for those mullions. And that's it. Oh, another important thing, markup for waste, right? So this whole thing is basically just using the measurements that we use to calculate the linear length of all the trim we need, right? So however much you want to add to account for waste and cutoffs, you can select from this drop-down menu, right? So that's just important to know. Generally, you're going to do 10 or 15%. But you can use whatever percent markup you want.